not looking to poke anybody in the eye, but I do believe it's worth our consideration to determine which translation of the Bible should and shouldn't we use. Now, I didn't ask which one is best. I think some preferences are allowed, but there are a group of people who are my brothers and sisters whom I love, who adhere to one English translation and one English translation only. It's the King James Version of the Bible. And I grant to you, my KJV only friend, I get your argument. I think it's a powerful argument. Nevertheless, I don't think that I'm persuaded that the King James Version of the Bible is the best translation. What is the argument of our brothers and sisters who believe the KJV is the almost inspired English text that we should be adhering to and exclusively using? The answer is, why would God give an English translation back in 1611 and then in the 20th century, finding a bunch of manuscripts, create something from an eclectic text? The difference between the King James Version and just about every other translation of the Bible in English today, this is the Textus Receptus, the best manuscripts that we had at the time in the early 17th century. Since then, we've found thousands of manuscripts, which is rockin' cool that we have that many manuscripts, because through textual criticism, you can figure out the most accurate ones, because there's human error that can be involved in scribal work. They just make mistakes. Sometimes it's unintentional, sometimes it's actually intentional. You compare a bunch of manuscripts and you go, this is clearly the one that is correct. So the texts that are used for instance, the NASB, ESV, NIV, pretty much every other translation but KJV is eclectic. The question is, which grouping of manuscripts is better? The KJV folks would say it has to be the Textus Receptus. We had it for hundreds of years, and now along come some interlopers to claim, no, some of those verses that are in the KJV shouldn't be in there. And they don't like, and I get it, believe me, I do appreciate the sentiment. It appears, yikes, these new translations, they're taking verses out of the Bible. Well, that is kind of a loaded presuppositional thought, assuming that this is the best manuscript that we could have used for the forever translation in English. Instead, I might suggest to you that because we found better manuscripts than the Textus Receptus, those verses shouldn't have been in there in the first place. Aha, says our KJV only friend. That's exactly my point. Why would God do that? And the answer to that question is, I don't know. I don't know. But I don't have to know the answer to that question. I can speculate. God used the KJV and continues to use the KJV mightily. He uses a lot of translations, even crummy ones. I don't know why he chose to do it that way. But here's what we're confronted with. The reality that we simply have better manuscripts today than in 1611.
King James onlyism is the belief that the 1611 King James Version of the Bible is the only divinely authorized English translation, while modern translations corrupt the Bible.
It's not just a deception, it's a satanic conspiracy against the Word of God.
The most glaring flaw with this doctrine is not one verse in the Bible supports it. And that's pretty much it. It's a false doctrine. Now, if someone wants to use the King James Bible, that's fine if you can understand it. But to say it's the only translation God approved is a lie. King James onlyists argue the KJV is translated from the majority text, while modern versions are from corrupt Alexandrian text. But the Byzantine texts used by King James translators were no older than the 11th century. We now have access to older and more reliable texts closer to the originals.
That's kind of a huge deal right there. When you have a manuscript, not an original copy, but when you have a manuscript closer in time to the original autograph, it's not a definitive ironclad rule, but most of the time you got yourself a better translation, but there are still more reasons.
King James onlyists say modern translations removed references to Christ's lordship and deleted entire Bible verses, but the Byzantine text added these verses to the original text and the extra references to Christ's lordship. It's just extra pious language from some overly ambitious scribes. King James onlyists say the 1611 authorized version is the only true Bible.
Unless you have a King James Bible, you don't have a Bible. You need a King James 1611 authorized version.
Actually, no one uses the 1611, which also included the Apocrypha. Today's King James Bible is the 1769 revision. God has preserved His Word, which we have in some very good translations of the Bible. Jesus said, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will never pass away," when we understand the text.
So, can we agree to disagree, my KJV only friend? I sure hope this is not an issue that separates the ins and the outs. Love you if you love your KJV, and I hope it is reciprocal.